Hello, I'm Susan Elliott, the news editor of Musical America. Today, we're going to be speaking with Kim Noltemy, the president and CEO of the Dallas Symphony. The Dallas Symphony was the first major American orchestra to return to the concert hall. And Kim is going to tell us about how they managed to do that and what they've been doing ever since. Kim, how are you?
I'm good, Susan, and sorry to keep you waiting.
Let's see, you started back with concerts in the hall in June,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you tell me what the musicians were doing up until that time when you couldn't get in the hall.
Well, so like most of the country, we were in a quarantine from around March 10th through the end of April, right? So at the beginning of May, we were allowed to, come out of our houses and go back to work on a very limited basis. And on June 10th, the governor of Texas put out an executive order that performing arts could open again at 25%. And
did you advocate for that, for what the governor letting the performing arts get back to normal, sort of, or somewhat back to normal?
Well, I definitely had connections with the governor's office through our chairman of the board. And so we submitted our plan to them, what we would do, how we would have people come in, all the precautions that we would take, how would we handle the orchestra, so the backstage and the front of house plans. And as a result of that, I think it helped move it along. I wouldn't say what they released was exactly what we had proposed, but there were some connections, and we were just thrilled that we had the opportunity. We didn't know, of course, at that time that this was going to go on for so long. We were thinking that, this will be over by the summer, or worst case, the fall. So we need to be able to keep active and be doing things. So, and of course, we talked with our committee, our orchestra committee, and I had orchestra meetings to get feedback. So it wasn't as if we were just doing this in, our management offices, which are in our homes at that time, and just working on something without involving the various parties, including Fabio, who was very encouraging.
From what I understand, you guys have stuck to your original schedule in terms of when the concert happened in the hall. Is that right?
Yes, we decided we wanted to, well, first of all, we were amazed that a huge number of our subscribers actually renewed, about 60%. And that's without knowing or being promised anything. And so with that, we decided we would keep the subscription schedule. And that way, as many of them who were willing could come, but on a rotation basis, obviously, because we would never be able to accommodate all of the subscribers for any series. At least we thought initially. I mean, we were originally thinking, okay, we'll start out slowly with 75 people and we'll build up. And by January, we'll have 500 people in the hall. And that has not happened because, of course, another surge of COVID.
You do one program a week, 3 concerts of one program a week, correct?
Yes, that's what we do. We also sometimes have an extra program, such as a youth family concert, or we did a unity concert in November. We did another standalone concert for first responders as a way to thank them for their hard work. And we're actually doing a first responders series, so we'll have another one in the first quarter as well.
Wow. And you're getting 200 people each concert in the hall. 200
yes.
In the audience.
In the audience, yes. So we're up to 200.
What has been your philosophy behind all this? You've been pretty aggressive about going as far as you can in terms of functioning as normally as you could. You're certainly doing a lot more concerts than any other orchestra I can think of in this country. What's been your thinking behind that?
I just felt strongly that the reason that we exist is to make live music. And it's really hard for our orchestra, and I would argue any orchestra, just to play in an empty hall. It's doable. People are doing it, they're recording it, but it's a very different feeling. And we have the 200 people, and when it was 75 people, it was the same. This incredible energy, even though, again, you're talking about 10% house fill, this energy that you feel and the excitement. People literally were crying at every single concert for weeks. Not every person in the audience, obviously, but many people were crying. They were so moved. Orchestra members felt very touched. Several times when the orchestra was getting off the stage at the end of the concert, people shouted from the audience, "Thank you so much. We miss you so much."
Oh.
And this is like, I mean, when you hear this, you're kind of thinking, wow.
Wow. Indeed.
And so I just, to me, that speaks to, why do we all do this? Well,
Yeah.
This is important because it changes people's lives. It brings them comfort, healing, inspires. It does all those things.
Right.
And somehow during this pandemic, we've all come closer to that idea, instead of, concerts week to week. Some you love, some you don't. People get a little ho-hum about it. Audience members fall asleep sometimes, all the different things that are typical. And now everybody is on the edge of their seat, loving every single minute.
Wow.
And I feel that way too. I'm kind of like, I can't go to enough concerts. It's a treat. It's a privilege that so many people don't have.
And you're doing as many as you would have if you were in a full season, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
It's remarkable. It's just remarkable. How often do your musicians get tested?
So the musicians are getting tested daily, and many people have told me, well, you could have them tested every other day or every third day, depending on the scenario. And honestly, I'm the one who has to sleep at night and be responsible for all of this. And I believe that if each day the musicians are on stage and they know that no one else on stage has COVID today at this moment in time, then they feel like they can really relax and concentrate and not be distracted by anything, just making music. And it's hard because they're socially distanced on stage. They're 6 feet apart, sometimes more. They're playing repertoire that's, for smaller orchestra, pieces, in many cases, that they wouldn't typically play or play at that size. And everyone is exposed. You can hear any mistake, because there's no hiding at all. There are just not enough players on stage for anyone to hide from an error. So I feel like it's my job, and it's our whole team's job, to give them the best possible opportunity to make the best music they can and be fully in that moment. You can go for a whole month and no one on any level, because we test some front of house people and some staff and the crew, and no one will have a positive test. And then the one positive test that you have, you realize how important it is that at that moment that you can react and take that person out of circulation and find out exactly who they had any interaction with. And we've been very fortunate, because on the orchestra side, we've had a few cases, but none of them have been playing at the time. So that was, one, I think it speaks volumes to how careful they're all being. But secondly, I think it shows that this daily testing and rotation is allowing us to be our best selves. Sometimes we get our test results in 6 or 8 hours, which is an incredible advantage.
The lab is actually on the
6
premises?
hours.
The lab is on the
Email
premises?
us. No, the lab is not on the premises. The lab is at the hospital, but it's a special lab for all these sort of outside groups who
I
are doing
see.
mass volume testing, and they just email us all the test results. It's funny how it's all worked out somehow. I don't know.
Well, tell me what your budget is now and was pre-pandemic.
So just before last fiscal year, our budget was essentially $40 million, and now it's down to 32 million.
Mhm.
You know, that's cuts related to this, clearly.
The musician's salary is the same, or?
No, the musicians took a pay cut of 10%, which I was trying to keep it as reasonable as possible because I was asking them to do a full schedule, plus a lot of extra activities like teaching and online teaching and calling donors and doing all kinds of other things.
And they were also delivering groceries, right?
Yes, they did deliver
Isn't that
groceries and
amazing?
donated groceries, and yeah, they were really part of the team. We all worked together and just did everything we could to make a
Yeah.
difference in the city. Music to people. We did more than 100 outdoor concerts, chamber music all around. And, usually you'd say, oh, it's too hot. No one's going to want to do that. It's too sunny. There's no stage. There's no sound system. But none of that mattered. We just went out and we're, on the pavement in a driveway having a concert for neighborhoods, 30 people, 20 people, whoever showed up. So it was I think a fun bonding experience, and I tried to go to as many as possible.
So obviously you and your musicians or management and the union are in sync, sounds like. But I don't know, has it always been like that in Dallas? I'm sure there's been times when it wasn't like that. And, one of the things that concerns me a great deal about recovery is the friction between unions and management, and how some of the unions appear not to understand that we're all going to have to suffer, right? So, and there are always a few that are kind of like, how dare you even think that way, I think. So, how have you done that?
Well, I started in 2018, and I came from, as you know, the Boston Symphony, where there's a really great relationship between the orchestra and management. And so that's kind of, to me, what the norm was. That's the only orchestra I ever worked in before this. And I felt like, well, that you can make that happen. Even if it weren't the case when you started, you could work on that and have that kind of relationship. And, I learned that from Mark Volpe, who, had that deep caring for the musicians and elevating the musicians to the center of what the organization is. And I would say to our orchestra all the time, what is the Dallas Symphony?
I should just, let me interrupt you. And for those who might not know, say that Mark is the CEO of the Boston Symphony, which is where Kim came from.
But anyway, the idea is that there's no Dallas Symphony without the Dallas Symphony, right? I mean, that's what we are as orchestras. I mean, we do other things. A lot of us have incredible education programs. Some of us own our halls or run our halls. And so there's another, line of business. We have ancillary income. We have, websites that bring a lot of people. But in the end, if you're leading an orchestra, isn't the point that it's about the music and about the orchestra? And so if you start with that position, then you can have meaningful dialogue with the orchestra on a daily basis and hear what they have to say. And many, they're very smart people and they have interesting ideas. And it's a process that, you go through. So when I started, I would say that, you know, the relationship between management and the orchestra was okay. It wasn't fabulous, but it wasn't bad. And I wanted it to be great from day one. I didn't know there was going to be a major worldwide crisis where that would be critical for the relationship to be great.
Yeah.
But I just thought this matters a lot, and I'm going to do everything I can to build my relationship with them. And so when we had these problems, they worked with us hand in glove to make changes and compromise. We compromised on both sides. We're doing everything we could do to make the organization successful. Initially, I talked with them about the idea of could we make up some of the services that were canceled during the actual quarantine, with the orchestra members selecting one of 3 tasks or a combination of 3 tasks that would make up hours. You know, one set of tasks was around donors and subscribers and patrons, calling them, doing Zoom calls with them, creating happy birthday videos for them, messages, all that kind of thing, but around the people who are supporting the organization. The second was teaching, you know, and most orchestra members don't have a huge amount of time to do teaching for the institution. They do private lessons and they do some helping the ones who love it. But in general, you don't have a huge number of players teaching as part of your education program. So I asked them to do that online. And then the third is just to play chamber music as much as possible, whether it's, you know, one of our musicians actually created her own chamber music series, doing things like Vivaldi Four Seasons with 12 players to smaller, you know, 3 or 4 people. And every single time she was fundraising and literally brought in giant wads of cash every week.
For the orchestra, for her, or for the orchestra?
For the orchestra. So she brought us about $30,000. And just her and she made this sign. We could have, of course, printed her a beautiful sign, but she made this handmade sign, which I think kind of spoke to the whole grassroots effort of it. And she would stand up there and say, you should donate money to the Dallas Symphony. And they had a bucket and people put checks and cash in the bucket. And, you know, she did this on her own. We had nothing to do with it. And others, you know, delivered food and went grocery shopping for these families that who are in our education programs, who had layoffs and really were struggling financially. We had another orchestra member literally call more than 100 subscribers and donors and talk to each of them for 30 minutes to an hour, just to check in, see what they think. She gave us a full detailed report of what they said, what they think, what music they like, the whole thing. I mean, just incredible. You know, I mean, it's more than anything I could have ever dreamed about. And there were literally so many people doing things like this. So it wasn't just 10 players. It was, you know, 40, 50, 60 players doing all of this kind of work.
Do you have any advice for your colleagues in terms of dealing with this and dealing with musicians?
The 2 things that drive me are, you know, the relationships that help you get things done and building the momentum in the community to make sure that the orchestra really matters in the community. And I think those 2 things are consistent, whether I was in my previous position or now leading an orchestra, and make a huge difference.
Well, you certainly accomplished that. So congratulations again. And thank you so much for talking to us.